All right, so here's the fourth part of the genetic engineering chapter. So in the other parts, we were talking about genetic engineering, a little bit of a difference. What is the difference between GMO, genetically modified organisms, versus transgenic? And GMOs are not always transgenic. Selective breeding produces a genetically modified organism. Labradoodle, Schnauzers, Great Danes, Rottweilers, etc. All dogs are produced through genetic modification. Selective breeding is a form of genetic modification. When you isolate certain traits into members of a population, you're genetically modifying them. You're not allowing natural processes to occur and natural selection, things like that. So that's something to keep in mind when somebody says, oh, GMOs are bad. Depends on how they're created. Are they created through transgenic processes, where you're taking genes from different species and splicing them together? Then maybe there is an argument there. So those, again, things I want you guys to think about, form opinions on, and back your opinion by fact, not just because here's the information, why I believe this. And then don't forget the types of technologies used. We talked about DNA extraction, we talked about cloning, we talked a little bit about electrophoresis, how we would go about pulling the DNA out and splicing it and inserting it in, and all those things. Those are all necessary parts of genetic engineering. So last lecture we were talking about corn, the BT corn that we grow and plant all over the Midwest. Well, another common crop out there are soybeans. Soybeans that are Roundup ready. And there is corn that's Roundup ready, there's wheat, there's all sorts of stuff. But the example here is Roundup ready soybeans. So Roundup is an herbicide, a chemical used to kill plants. Well, there's a gene that resists that chemical. That gene has been inserted into soybeans, inserted into corn, etc. So the principle here is farmer can plant a field of soybeans. Field's going to grow. Weeds are going to grow. So now they can go in and spray Roundup on those fields, kill the weeds, the beans survive. It increases yields, it increases productivity, it increases profit margin, it decreases the labor of, is anybody going to go and walk the fields and cut the beans out by hand? Odds are no. It's going to eliminate jobs to some extent because now you don't need farm labor to weed your bean field. Instead, you use a chemical. But it does increase the yields and the profit margin for the agricultural community. The challenge, though, is when you start spraying these chemicals, not all the weeds are going to die. This is a field outside of Petersburg. Notice these weeds have not died. The field was sprayed with Roundup. The other weeds died. Those didn't. Those weeds are resistant. Actually, let me change that. Let's go little r. So now let's go back to genetics. If that weed is little r because it's resistant, and that weed is little r because it's resistant, if those two weeds reproduce, let's go back to our Punnett squares, and you have resistant weeds that carry resistant traits, look at all their babies. They're all resistant. This is what causes resistance to grow, one of the factors, I should say, that causes resistance to grow within populations. So now every baby from those two weeds, 100% of the offspring, are going to carry the resistant gene. So now can we come up with a different chemical that kills the resistant plants? Possible. It's an evolutionary arms race. We're constantly changing, adjusting, modifying in an effort to stay ahead of this or to stay up with it. So things we have to consider when we are working with transgenic organisms. Now the animal world is not excluded from this scenario. We've created transgenic animals, splicing of genes into different animals to get them to develop, to produce certain traits. Process is similar to what we talked about earlier in the lectures taking the gene, putting it into a virus, a vector, inserting it into a cell. In this scenario, you're looking at the gene for producing a certain type of clotting factor. So if somebody is anemic and they cannot clot their blood, they're missing a certain gene, they don't produce a protein. Well, can we take the good gene from a person and insert that into a goat? So insert it into the zygote of the goat. So here's the egg, the sperm, etc. Put it into that. And now that gene, that little red human gene, is inside of that developing animal. So let's put that developing egg inside of a host goat. So inside there's a little baby goat growing there. And then when that baby goat is born, it has that red human gene to produce the clotting factor. When that goat produces milk, the clotting factor is in the milk. So now if you're anemic, drink goat's milk with the clotting factor, you're putting that into your body. So animals, again, have been no exception to the transgenic world. Been messing with animals for decades. So clotting factor is just one thing. There's some movement putting growth hormone into milk, all these other things. So take a look at these animals. So the mouse on the left, this guy here, bigger than its natural brother on the right. Look at the cow. Check out the size of her udder. Enlarged, increased to produce more milk. Check out the genetically modified salmon. In the same amount of time, 18 months, that genetic salmon is over twice the size of the farm-raised normal salmon. So 6.6 pounds versus 2.8. It grows faster. Is that a good thing? If you're talking about food production and profit margins, absolutely. I can raise more fish faster than I can if I do it the other way. I can sell them bigger. I can make more money. I can feed more people. Absolutely a good thing. The unknown, though, this is the big reason why I want you guys to look into this more on your own, to make an opinion on it. The big question mark in the unknown, what is the human impact? When you eat, when we all eat, this is not easy to do. Impact. What is the human impact when we eat a genetically modified salmon, when we drink milk from a cow that's been given growth hormone? How does that impact us? Because it will, especially developing children, babies who are raised their entire lives on genetically modified foods. What kind of impact is that making on them? Here's a very big hypothetical, hypothesis, question. Is eating genetically modified organisms a contributing factor to many of the health issues we see in children today? Is it part of the diabetes epidemic? Is it part of the allergies, Alzheimer's, Asperger's, autism, ADD, ADHD, all these other acronyms that are out there? Is the food contributing to that? And some people say, oh, absolutely. Where's the evidence? We need to study this. We need to get a better handle on this and do research and run the scientific method, draw conclusions to then be able to come back and say, yes, this is causing these problems. There's a correlation, or no, we don't see a correlation. It must be some other factor that is contributing to these other issues. So those are things I want us to think about. Biggest question, though, is do you even want to know if you're eating food that's genetically modified? There's no law requiring this on labels at this point. Do you want that? As a consumer, if you want to know what is in the food you're eating, vote for labeling. Vote for, I want labels showing me which food products are genetically modified, which food products are not genetically modified. Require that. Push for that, and then the labels will be, it can become law that those labels have to be produced. This is why every restaurant puts out their food, the nutritional charts, because consumers demanded it, became a law, And by law, McDonald's, Hardee's, everybody has to present that information so a consumer can make an educated decision when they're buying a meal. You know, going to McDonald's, how many calories you're going to get with your Big Mac, cheeseburger, extra large fries, and a Coke meal. It's right there. Now it's your choice to use or not use that information, but it's there by law. Do we want that same law with genetically modified organisms? Those are things we have to think about and then vote on it. Make your voice heard. There are more non-bio majors out there than biologists. You have a stronger voice when it comes to voting for things like this. All right, so the concern is always, what are the potential negatives? Do the positives outweigh the negatives? Hopefully they do. But one of the safety guidelines that's out there that is hopefully implemented is that transgenic organisms are not supposed to be able to breed in the wild. The idea is, okay, if we're creating these things, they don't get beyond the laboratory, or they do not go out into the wild and reproduce with native populations and then start messing up native genetics and who knows what they're doing to the species. So, soybeans, hey, they shouldn't be able to reproduce with anything else. Problem is, we find weeds that are picking up the genes from the soybeans. We find other plants that are picking up those resistant genes. Salmon, these things get out of captivity and they get into the wild. They wreak havoc when they're in the wild. They just mess up native salmon populations. But the goal is to try to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. So this is a very big aspect of all of our lives, the biotechnology, genetic engineering. Get more knowledgeable about it and learn more about it, and then figure out how does it impact you. So when you make a decision, you vote for this or vote for that, or you buy this product or you don't buy that product, you're doing so because of the information you have at hand and your knowledge that this is not good, this one is good, etc. All right, so hopefully you guys do some out-of-class research, look into this after the semester's over, later in life, and you get more educated on it, because it is a field that is very exciting and is changing all of the time.